Hello friends, once again we are back with a discussion on an interesting thing, narratives and fake narratives. This becomes very interesting and important, especially given the election seasons. Let me take you through a very small interesting example. Have a look at this slide. This slide tries to come up with a number of the middle class in India. It starts off with saying the average income per capita in India is about 98,000 rupees. 1% of the population holds about 73% of the country's wealth. Let me repeat, 1% of the country's population holds about 73% of the country's wealth. Look at the next number. The bottom 20% in any developing country may be fairly assumed to be poor. So, you are talking of 1% of the country's population holding 73% of the wealth, 98,000 rupees being an average per capita income, and 20% of the country's population being poor, and therefore 73 plus 20 becomes 93, 100 minus 93 is 7. Therefore, 7% of the country's population is middle class. A bit funny, isn't it? Things somehow doesn't seem to add up. You are talking a stock concept like wealth and juxtaposing that with a flow concept like income. You are taking on the one hand 73% of the wealth held by 1% of the population and adding to it 20% of the country's population which is poor. Some of things just don't add up, right? You for sure believe that this is being done by someone who is just a juvenile trying to sort of get his hands in the basics of economics. Friends, have a look at the slide once again. And if I told you that it is not an undergraduate student who is doing it, but it is written by a former finance minister of the country, you would be a bit astonished, amused maybe, surprised. And this former finance minister was also the former home minister of the country, Mr. Palaniyappan Chidambaram, P. Chidambaram. I am sure you people will refuse to believe that a person of his stature could make these kinds of absolute silly basic mistakes. That's exactly the point. If it were to be told by someone like his boss, Mr. Rahul Gandhi, people might very graciously ignore it, saying that it's Rahul Gandhi who's spoken. But if an intellectual like Mr. Chidambaram has said this, has written this in an article published on the 14th of March in a well-known business paper, you can understand that there is something to it much more than what meets the eye. Why is it a former finance minister, known to be a Harvard educated person, can get into a number spinning that's obviously not at all right? Then come to think of the fact that this is how narratives, the wrong narratives and the fake narratives are built. Numbers that don't relate to each other are brought in together, forced together. You torture the numbers, you twist the numbers to come up with an outcome that you want a priori. No wonder it was the same Mr. Chidambaram who, as an income tax officer, put it across very graciously, had a crores and crores of income generated out of agriculture. How? He grew cabbages in his pots in the terraces of his house. Come to think of it, the same Mr. Chidambaram knew how to get the money round and round about, but the ED was too smart for him. Be it the INX media case or similar such cases, Mr. Chidambaram unfortunately had to face the ignominy of staying in the same jail that he had inaugurated. He spent 106 nights there. We are here not to discuss Mr. Chidambaram per se, but look at the larger picture. What is the larger picture? What is the kind of a leadership that we want for the country? It's election times, 5 states going for elections. Who are the leaders that we would want to have as our rulers? People who are smart, educated, intelligent? Yes, undoubtedly yes. But that's not all. We want people with some values, people with some credibility, and the credibility should come out of their action due to the commitment to the national causes. Take the case of Mr. Sridharan, 88-year-old, or should I say 88-year young Mr. Sridharan, who till yesterday has been working very dedicatedly on building the national infrastructure for the country, called the Metro Man for no wrong reason. He is a man committed to building the country's infrastructure through the metros, through the Konkan railways, so on and so forth, not just in one place but in tens and tens of cities across the country, in the most capable, effective and efficient way. That's the kind of leadership that we would want in a place like Kerala. We want Kerala to develop. We want Kerala to become a good growing state. How does that happen? That can happen with leaders who are capable, intelligent and selfless. Let's come to Tamil Nadu, Mr. Chidambaram's home state. We have a person like Mr. Annamalai, a former IPS officer and an IIM graduate to the boot. He has given up his lucrative corporate career or a very safe, secure IPS career to be in the service of the country, of his home state. These are the kind of people, these are the kind of leaders who are not only smart and intelligent and wise, but are also selfless, that is required for the country. It's one thing to have a Palaniyappan Chidambaram speak impeccable English, be Harvard educated, but spin the numbers to his advantage. But more important, the country needs are people who are dedicated to the country's cause, who are selfless to that extent that they can put the country's interest above theirs. Coming back to the same narrative, the whole intent of the article Mr. Chidambaram wrote was not just about arriving at the middle class, which in itself was fudged, muddled and intentionally confusing. More important was his views on that. The views that the middle class are not contributing to the country's progress. Rich of this to come from a person who's been there all through his life, a sycophant of an incapable Rahul Gandhi, holding ministerial positions and abusing it for his personal gains and his son's personal gains. Probably he sets the record for being the only father-son duo to be spending good amount of time behind the bars. An interesting example, I must bring it before you. We have a Prime Minister who makes a public commitment, na khaunga, na khane dunga. And an interesting exemplar of his work is the direct benefit transfer. Roughly about 10 lakh crore rupees in the last 6.5 years have been transferred directly to the beneficiaries via the DBT mode. I'll just give a very small brief numerical example. Rajiv Gandhi in 1985 had made a public statement saying if New Delhi sent 1 rupee to a village, by the time it reached there, it had become only 15 paisa. A leakage to the extent of 85%. Let's be conservative, let's be gracious to the Congress corrupt ministers and say that the loot was only about 30% during the UPA days. A 10 lakh crore transferred to the beneficiaries without any loot, without any pilferage was 10 lakh crores to the beneficiaries. But if you had the corrupt ministers sitting there taking about 30% of their commission, you are talking of a 3 lakh crore in just about 6 years in one area, one domain. Imagine the kind of projects that would run into lakhs and crores of rupees, where a similar 20%, 30% would run into lakhs and crores of rupees into the pockets of this corrupt netas. So the point needs to be very clear. It's not just about fudging one particular number. It is their DNA. It is in their blood to fudge the numbers. Be it writing an article, be it getting the figures for the GDP, be it getting the numbers for the overall national progress. Especially for a poor man, it makes a world of difference to have a Prime Minister like Modi and good leaders like Annamalai and Sridharan who will ensure that each rupee that's meant for them reaches them. Coming back to the point, elections come and go, but the elections are an important milestone for each one of us individually as well. This is where one vote of yours to the right man will make a world of difference for the next 5 years and beyond, not just for your state but for the country as such. We are here to build a strong nation, we are here to build a credible nation, and the only way to do this is bring good people to power. You have a Metro Man Sridharan as an example, you have an Annamalai as an example, and let Chidambaram be a warning and let these two great role models be examples. Goodbye.